Hi, my name is Pavel Pyś. I'm curator of visual arts at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis and curator of the exhibition The Body Electric. I'm really grateful to Rina Carvajal, Isabella Villanueva, Paul Rogers, and the entire team at the Miami-Dade College Museum of Art for making this exhibition possible in really challenging times. And today I'm going to share with you a brief presentation about some of the inspirations behind the show, as well highlighting some of the works in the exhibition that really resonate given that the times we're in. The Body Electric first opened at the Walker in March 2019. It traveled to the Yerba Buena Center in San Francisco in September 2019 and opened at the end of 2020 in Miami. The Body Electric is an exhibition that brings together over 50 artists across a 60-year period starting in the late 1950s right through to today. It's a show that brings together artists who share an engagement with the way in which technology, and especially screen technologies, have been changing our understanding of embodiment and identity, especially in relation to gender, sexuality, race, ethnicity, and belonging. The show grew from wanting to really historicize and bring into dialogue a younger generation of artists who are working with technologies such as CGI, screen capturing, digital renderings, avatars, artificial intelligence, virtual assistants, and really wanting to show their work within a historical trajectory. To make the point that while technology changes, if we look at artists across different generations, there are shared affinities and common ground that are worth exploring and thinking about together across time. The exhibition is not organized chronologically. It's largely thematic, with some moments in which unique singular artists are highlighted. And bringing the show to Miami was a really amazing opportunity in that we were able to expand the scope of the show, add a number of voices, and present new works that haven't been included in the show before, and also artists who haven't been seen in Miami before. So I'm just going to share with you a brief presentation and tell you a little bit about some of the areas of inspiration that were important to me in developing this show. So I think today, more than ever, and I'm especially aware of this, speaking to you from my living room, speaking to my Mac, we're spending more and more time in front of our computer screens. We're in a moment in which various industries, but also artists are starting to engage with things like augmented reality, artificial intelligence, virtual assistants. We're in a moment in time in which our homes are becoming smart through technologies, where increasingly we're buying wearables and intelligent clothing. We're also at a time in which there's a huge amount of disinformation, and it's increasingly challenging to separate fact from fiction and to understand even what's real and what has been rendered. We're also at a time in which there's already a generation of people who have grown up vis-a-vis the screen and who are digital natives, having grown up on the internet. So I think more now than ever, these ideas around identity and embodiment and how we understand these questions vis-a-vis the screen are really pertinent and important. I mentioned that the show is not organized chronologically, but the first gallery that you enter is really the gallery that brings together the pioneering voices of artists in the late 1950s through to the early 60s, who really were the first to take the television and engage with it both as the subject, but also the material of their work. And these include artists like Namjoon Paik, Charlotte Moorman, Marta Minuchin, Volv Vostell, Shigeka Kubota, Joan Jonas. And in this first section, you can see a number of works that attest to an interdisciplinary engagement with the screen. You have TV Bra for Living Sculpture by Namjoon Paik, which is now a sculpture, a remnant of a performance in which Charlotte Moorman would wear the TV bra while playing the cello. There's an incredible sculpture by Volv Vostell from the 1980s. And I think when we see these works, it's kind of hard at this point to remember just how radical and groundbreaking these voices were at the time. But these were artists who really seized upon the screen to question the way in which the television occupied such a prime and important place in our lives. you can see that here there are a few images in which we see Namjoon Paik and Charlotte Moorman, but also on the right-hand side is an image from a performance called TV Burying from 1963 by Vol Vostell, in which a television was wrapped in barbed wire. It had pies thrown at it. It was ritualistically carried in front of an audience and then buried in the ground. Really amazing gestures and ways in which these artists were breaking new ground with their experiments. And I think for Vol Vostell, it's super interesting to think back to the way that he spoke of these. He said that events were, in his words, weapons to politicize art. For him, his happenings were opportunities for, as he said, to desacralize the televisions and to really question the way that that technology played such an important role in everyday life. In Miami, I'm really thrilled that the exhibition includes an incredible work by the Argentine artist Marta Minujín, which is called Simultaneity in Simultaneity from 1966. This is an important early work by the artist that took place as part of three-country happening that was organized by Minujín together with Alan Caprow and also Wolf Vostell. In this performance, Minujín gathered a number of famous people. So those included critics, journalists, models, intellectuals, curators, and she brought them together in the auditorium of the Institute Torquato di Tella. And everyone was very carefully documented through photographs and film. And then she invited that same group back a week later and instructed them to wear exactly the same clothes and sit exactly in the same spot where they had been the preceding week. And then footage was shot of those individuals seeing on screens in front of them footage from the preceding week, which then was transmitted via television, newspaper messages, telegrams, and radio, creating a really powerful comment on how mass media shape our social interactions and also shape our memory. Much later in 1994, Minujín said, "TV transforms people's life, changes you, emits waves, and permeates you. It should be used for great things, but mediocrity conquered." And I think those are words that certainly ring true today, given the times that we're in. The next section of the show is called Performing for the Camera. And here, there are a number of artistic positions from the 1960s right up to today of artists who are engaging with photography, analog video, webcams. And what they all share is that they are turning the lens of the camera onto their own bodies, creating this private space of performance in which they raise questions about embodiment and thinking about various themes such as race, visualizing queerness, patriarchal attitudes, femininity, beauty, and the conventions that are ascribed to these various themes. Of course, in many ways, these ideas resonate today when we think about the proliferation of social media, whether it's Instagram or TikTok. All of us are turning the lens of our cameras onto ourselves, creating these private spaces of performance for our followers. So I think that this history really rings true given the times that we're in. I won't dwell too much on this section, but there are a few sub-themes or groupings of artists who share common concerns, and some of those include artists like Lorna Simpson, Cindy Sherman, Valley Export, Ana Mendieta, artists who are turning to the format of the pinup or the men's magazine spread to talk about femininity and lust, others who are exploring conventions around the female body, around gender, and certainly vis-a-vis the patriarchy, which you can see in the amazing early video by Valley Export here called Touch Cinema. There are also a number of artists such as Rhys Ernst and Zachary Drucker, Claudio Perna, Lyle Ashton Harris, Paul Mpagi Sapuya, Juliana Huxtable, who are exploring queer identity. And very much in this show, there was a desire to elevate LGBTQ voices. And here you can just see a few examples of some of the works by these artists in the exhibition. So performing for the camera is very much about the artist's own body, but this idea extends also to many of the works that engage with avatars. And I think here you can see just a few examples of avatars that we come across more and more increasingly in everyday life. We have here Lil Michaela, who you can follow on Instagram, a virtual influencer that was created by the startup McFedries. There's a recently launched virtual assistant called Vi, the Auckland Airport biosecurity officer, who helps and works with the team during busy peak times to ask incoming passengers biosecurity questions. And at the bottom, there are also a number of Samsung Neon avatars, which really flopped at the January 2020 Consumer Electronics Show. But increasingly, I think we will see that these play more and more of a role in our everyday lives. And avatars are reflected certainly in many of the works on view in The Body Electric. Two voices that I was really excited to contrast to artists of different generations, but also to see how the technology really differs. Here we have on the left-hand side Pierre Weig's 2 Minutes Out of Time from 2000, and on the right-hand side, Happy Birthday by Ed Atkins from 2014. 2 Minutes Out of Time is part of a larger project that Pierre Weig with other collaborators developed called No Ghost, Just a Shell, in which a manga character of Anne Lee, the image of which you can see here, was given life or given a narrative through a series of projects, including this moving image work. And it's a brief film in which we hear Anne Lee describing their existence. And while at first her voice seems to be that of an adult, it quickly changes to a tense tone of a young girl who describes viewing a painting of water lilies and disappearing into a strange light. The voice, in reality, is actually an altered recording of a 5-year-old girl to whom Pierre Weig showed the manga character picture and asked how she might respond if she knew that the character had only 2 minutes to live. But we have this incredible sorrowful tale of a virtual being describing their life. The piece is shown very nearby Happy Birthday by Ed Atkins, which is from more recent time from 2014. And here we come across a much more realistic avatar of a male character voiced by Ed, by the artist. And what we hear is the character mumbling through what appear to be an arbitrary list of dates and years and time codes as he seems to be trying to remember something, a significant event perhaps. And as he searches back in his, let's say, memory, various imagery appears collaged, CGI swirling animations, the night sky, a bedroom. And what I love about this piece is just how pathetic the character is and how you build a rapport and you feel a sense of empathy towards this person. Ed Atkins has described this piece as a work full of, as he says, terrible nostalgia, melancholic meditation on memory and mortality. And what I think is really interesting about these two pieces is that while they delve into the digital realm, they're absolutely anchored in the real world. Anne Lee's voice comes from a real child's voice. And similarly in Ed Atkins's piece, the likeness of the character that you see is someone in real life. It has been scanned from someone's head. And then the model, the 3D model, was purchased by the artist from the website TurboSquid, where you can buy a number of 3D stock models that are typically used for computer games or adult entertainment and architectural renderings. Even earlier to Ed Atkins and Pierre Weig, these ideas were being explored by Lynn Hirschman-Leeson in her pioneering work, Deep Contact, in which you, as the gallery viewer, are invited to engage with an avatar called Marion. And the work consists of two elements: a screen in front of you in which you hear and can observe Marion, and then a touch screen on a pedestal. And you can press on different body parts which correspond to different narrative possibilities. And there's a map next to the piece as well, which shows you what might lead to the next sequence. And I think there's something really interesting in this piece about this kind of issue of intimacy, but also the technological promise of this voyeuristic encounter that the work offers you, as well as this really slippery issue of the objectification of the female body in the work. Many other artists in the show, I won't dwell on it too much, but many artists who come from a performing arts or a theater background have been engaging with the space between their body and the camera and its mediated image. And a number of those voices are present in the show, such as the Wooster Group, Ulrika Rosenbach, or Joan Jonas. A work that was made especially for the show is by the London-based artist Zach Blass. This is a piece called Icosahedron, which really thinks about rapidly advancing technologies of prediction. And so what we have here is a desk that Blass has described as a satirical take on what Peter Thiel's work desk might look like. Thiel is an entrepreneur and venture capitalist, also the founder of Palantir Technologies, which is a data analytics company that takes its name after a crystal ball in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. And so here on the desk, there is a crystal ball in which an elf avatar is floating and responding to questions about the future and future events. So in this work, Zach Blass is really nodding to the way in which businesses structure their work around play, which is certainly the way in which Palantir Technologies has structured their work in the past. We have here a few other sci-fi references on the desk. There are a number of elements that are borrowed from fantastical sources. We have here the Philosopher's Stone, which is a red glowing stone that you might recognize from the Harry Potter stories. And the work itself references the 20-sided die that can be found inside the fortune-telling Magic 8-ball toy. On top of the desk, there are a number of books by philosophers and fiction writers, including Yuval Noah Harari, William Golding, and the elf within the globe has been trained on these various writings to respond to different prompts. One of the, and I should also add here on the right-hand side is one of the inspiration points for Zach's piece, which was Azuma Hikari, a virtual girlfriend developed by a Japanese company, which you can see here. It appears as a hologram in a cylindrical object with which you can correspond, you can exchange text messages, you can ask your virtual girlfriend to turn the lights on in your apartment. So one of the starting points for Zach's piece. Another work that dwells upon these issues is an incredible installation by Trisha Baga called Molusca and the Pelvic Floor. This is a work in which there is a unfolding 20-minute or so film in front of you, which appears in 2D with a number of 3D elements. So there are two projections. One is a 2D projection of light and shadow interplay, and then the 3D projection shows the moving image work. In front of the piece is a number of objects that Trisha has arranged on the floor of the gallery. And the work is a collage of appropriated imagery from various Hollywood movies like Ivan Reitman's Evolution or Contact by Robert Zemeckis that have to do with interspecies breeding, interstellar travel. And what I really love about the piece is throughout the work, we have this incredible confusion of what is on screen and what is off screen. We see Trisha Baga herself within the piece, performing for the camera, appearing both within the projection, but also her shadow appears in the interplay of light and shadow from the 2D projection. And the work is largely dealing with issues of interstellar travel, interspecies breeding, the future of our species, metamorphosis, interspecies breeding, but also the relationship between ourselves and artificial intelligence. The work includes a number of moments in which Trisha's voice is engaging with an Amazon Alexa virtual assistant, which appears within the grouping of objects that you see on the floor. And we hear the artist trying to train Alexa to respond to Malexa or Molusca, as if Trisha herself was trying to give this piece of disembodied artificial intelligence a material form. As we think about these moments in which artists are really thinking about the disembodied and the virtual, I have also placed a number of works that act as counterpoints. As we negotiate so much of our lives through the screen and through digital imagery, there's this slippage of uncertainty and queasiness around materials that I think is very interesting. And I really wanted to offer material counterpoints to the works in which artists are moving nimbly into the virtual realm. So we have works by Ivana Basic, Bruce Nauman, Robert Gober, Helen Martin, Christian Markley, which are decidedly about material, and they act as a counterpoint to many of the immaterial concerns that appear in other works. A lot of the questions that we're facing today really have to deal with surveillance and thinking about how our digital footprint online, as well as our use of social media, how those apps that we use and those online engagements, how are they traced and how are they used for surveillance purposes. And on occasion of the show in Miami, we were able to add two voices who really, whose works really speak to these themes. So those include the work of Hito Steil, as well as Raphael Lozano-Hemmer. Lozano-Hemmer's piece, Surface Tension, really emphasizes your embodied encounter in the gallery space. It's a work that, through a computerized surveillance system, we see a huge projected eye that actually follows you around the gallery space, immediately conjuring the question of who is watching you and why. These are also concerns that are of crucial importance to Hito Steil and her expansive installation, How Not to Be Seen, from 2013, which occupies the largest gallery at MOAD. This is a single channel video with a number of sculptural components around it. And in the piece, Steil teaches us 5 various lessons of how to disappear. The first is to make something invisible for the camera. The second is to be invisible in plain sight. The third is to become invisible by becoming a picture. The fourth, to be invisible by disappearing. And the fifth, to become invisible by merging into a world made of pictures. It's a very playful and ironic and humorous piece. The work's title actually comes from a Monty Python sketch, but it dwells on very important issues of privacy, power, control within an increasingly digital and expanded environment. How are we surveilled through our smartphones? How do social media activities contribute to monitoring? The exhibition's next section is called The Power of Images, and it looks at how artists are responding to the ways in which mass media are shaping and influencing our understanding of the body and identity. Within this section, there are a number of artists, including Martine Sims, Sandra Perry, Nancy Burson, Gretchen Bender, Sitzel Meinische Hansen. And these artists are either performing fictional identities or adopting familiar TV icons to challenge stereotypical understandings of the body and to critique those power structures. So here we have an incredible work by Sandra Perry, who largely works with video, computer-based media, and performance to think about how technology can shape or limit representation. This piece is called Graft and Ash for a 3-monitor workstation. And here we have a piece of exercise equipment with 3 monitors affixed to the top. And what we see in this is a story which is narrated by the artist's own avatar, describing the limitations of the software and the limitations of the software in rendering the human body. The avatar speaks of how the program could not replicate her fatness, and how physical features are not fully represented by the software. This piece is very important because it really speaks to, it's of course humorous, but it also speaks to really important issues around racial bias within technology and how technology is absolutely not neutral. And this is something that has certainly come up in the way in which, for example, soap dispensers would not recognize darker skin tones, or in Tay tweets, which you can also see on this slide, which was an artificial intelligence chatterbot that was released by Microsoft and Twitter in 2016, which caused a huge controversy for being hacked by online trolls and effectively then spewing out incredibly racist and sexually charged messages, forcing Microsoft to actually have to take down the chatterbot. These ideas are also really important to an artist like Sitzel Meinische Hansen, a London-based artist, editor, and author whose practice thinks about gender and labor in the context of robotics, pornography, and technology. This work is called Second Sex War, and it includes an animation, a CGI animation called Dick Girl 3DX. And within this animation, the artist uses the avatar of Eva version 3.0 which is a royalty-free avatar purchased through TurboSquid again, the same company that Ed Atkins purchased the male likeness for Happy Birthday. And in this hypersexualized video, we see Eva fitted with genital props and interacting through movement that was motion captured from pornographic films, interacting with an amorphous 3D figure, which is actually a piece of clay. And in this work, the artist is thinking about how to engage with, as they describe, post-human porn production from within, and think about the rules that govern and control portrayals of the female body. The piece was originally in Minneapolis and in San Francisco shown on an Oculus Rift VR headset. And in many ways, you can draw parallels between this particular piece and the rapidly advancing way in which the porn industry is investing in VR content. Some voices from a preceding generation that are included in this section include Gretchen Bender and Nancy Burson. The work by Gretchen Bender is called TV, Text, and Image. It's from 1989, and it's a work in which 4 TV screens are constantly showing live feed news cycles, and on the screens are, in black laminate, 4 texts. These include statements that are "where truth lies," "self-censorship," "no criticism," "image world." And so in many ways, I think what's great about this piece is it contrasts the current events that we're experiencing with the text, but it also stands in a way as a kind of early take on the conversation between image and text, which is so prevalent in the form of memes or tweets today. And here we have the artist disrupting and rupturing that, thinking about the relationship between the image and the text. On the right-hand side, there's Nancy Burson, who has a number of works in the show. And Burson was one of the first figures to really work with digital technology within the genre of photographic portraiture. And she worked with scientists at MIT to develop software that could be used to age a human face. And this particular work from the 1980s is a work in which she would digitally blend images of various individuals to create composite portraits of people like businessmen or movie stars or assassins. And so this particular image was created by putting together digital images that relate to 5 world leaders. You can see them described here in the artwork title. The composite was created using images, each that are represented proportionally by the number of nuclear warheads deployable by the nation that they led at the time. A younger voice within this section, who's represented through 2 works, is Martine Sims. Martine Sims has 2 pieces. One is a large wall mural, which you can see here on the left, called Misdirected Kiss, as well as her really well-known work, Notes on Gesture. Misdirected Kiss is a really immersive collage that features photographs from Martine Sims's family, references to celebrated Black American figures like, for example, Mae C. Jemison, the first Black woman to travel to space. But there are also challenging images within this selection, including a still from the dash cam footage of the arrest in 2015 of Sandra Bland. Interspersed throughout are references to academic texts that address race, class, and gender. And together, the wallpaper really thinks about how these different sources, whether they're more familiar and personal or whether they're borrowed from various cultural texts, how they influence personal and social constructions, in this particular case of Black femininity. This is a theme that also runs through Notes on Gesture, which thinks about this idea through the visual language of the looped GIF. In this piece, we see another artist, a friend of Martine's, the artist Diamond Stingley, repeating a number of authentic and dramatic gestures that relate to African-American women. As Martine Sims has said, famous women, infamous women, and unknown women. The work was inspired by a text from 1644 by the English philosopher John Bulwer called Chirologia. It's a text that thinks about the communicative meaning of hand movements. And so here we have in Martine Sims's video this inventory of various gestures that, as we watch the piece, force us to question the way and the assumptions we make about a person's appearance, their behavior, and their nonverbal communication. Sandra Perry's work and Martine Sims's work is contrasted with the work of Lynn Hirschman-Leeson and the various materials that relate to a project called Roberta. This is a project that was started in 1972 in which the artist created the persona, a fictional persona of Roberta Brightmore, who had her own clothing, makeup, walk, gestures, speech pattern, and handwriting. And in the following years, the character undertook real life events such as opening a bank account, getting a credit card, renting an apartment, seeing a psychiatrist. And so these various artifacts, which include personal checks or therapy session notes and letters, they really speak to the relationship between performance and deceit, and thinking about the slippages and lapses in the policing and the supervision of identity. The exhibition's final room is called the Malleable Body, and it really thinks about how artists have been engaging with the body as fluid and subject to change. Where does the body begin and where does the body end and technology begins, and how the body is shaped through internal or external sources. I was really thrilled to add two works by Tishan Su to the Miami presentation, two works from 1986. Incredible pieces that you can learn more about in a conversation that will be published on the MOAD website between Tishan and the artist Jess Fan, whose work is shown nearby. Here we have two works in which suggest the language of computers, of dashboards, but works that are also suggestive through their use of rounded corners, and through these kind of suggestions of skin or flesh. They suggest the human body as well. And I think there's, as Tishan's recent large-scale survey at the Hammer and the Sculpture Center showed, there's a really prescient question to Tishan's work, which is, how do we embody technology? How has the hardware of technology changed our own bodies and our own behavior? Nearby are younger voices, including those of Carolyn Lazard and Andrea Crespo. On the left-hand side is a work by Carolyn Lazard that is called In Sickness and Study, which documents the biweekly intravenous iron infusions, blood infusions that the artist would receive for treatment. And each image shows the artist's hand holding the cover of whatever book they were happening to be reading at the time. These were originally shared to Instagram and then have been presented within the gallery space for the Body Electric. And on the right-hand side is a still from a work by Andrea Crespo called Parabiosis 2.2, which is a work that really thinks about how do we come to understand our own bodies vis-a-vis the screen and vis-a-vis online communities. These are shown also with a number of sculptural elements within the MOAD presentation. Many of the works on view had to be completely changed. Given COVID-19, we removed the headphones, we had to accommodate social distancing in a new way, but there are also pieces that have really changed in terms of the moment that we're in. And this piece by Josh Klein is perhaps the best example of that. This is a work that consists of 5 hand sanitizer dispensers that you now find absolutely everywhere when you need to negotiate public spaces. These were originally made in 2011. And within these, there are nutrient gels that are growing bacteria from 5 different sites that were collected by the MOAD team before the opening of the show. In the Twin Cities, when we presented the exhibition at the Walker, those 5 sites included the hunting section of a Walmart, a Home Depot checkout line, leaflets from a US military recruiting station, a McDonald's tabletop, and also the back of a long-haul trailer truck. And then the locations in Miami include the Beach Convention Center, the Hotel Delano, the Standard Miami Spa and Hotel, Joe's Stone Crab, and a luxury yacht. So 2 very different ways of painting a social like a class picture in each of these different locations, but also 2 works now that really, works that really resonate in a different way, given that the time that we're in. Some of the final works that I want to touch upon are the works of Jess Fan and Mariana Simnett, in which both artists are really exploring the ways in which bodies and bodily substances are gendered and how we understand these through a gendered lens. On the left-hand side is Jess Fan's Systems 2, which includes a lattice-like framework upon which glass ampules filled with silicone are resting, and within the silicone are a number of materials that relate to the body, including melanin, estradiol, and depotestosterone. And so in this piece, the artist is really thinking about how hormones are used within hormone therapy, but also how, as substances, they're gendered. And there's something really interesting and absurd to come across these nearly invisible molecular things that are floating in silicone, and to really think about how they affect the way that we perceive ourselves and others. The work by Mariana Simnett is a piece called The Needle and the Larynx from 2016, which explores similar questions, but through the form of a fantastical story. It's a piece that is shown in really slow motion, and we see the artist Mariana Simnett sitting in a doctor's office and receiving an injection of Botox into her larynx, which effectively paralyzes the muscle and lowers her voice. This procedure is one that's typically reserved for men who perceive their voices to be not deep enough. And throughout the story that unfolds in front of us, we hear Mariana Simnett describing a fictional story, a fairy tale, in which a young woman wants to command more authority, and the doctor refuses to generate the procedure. Speaking of this piece, Mariana Simnett has said it melts the borders of what it means to be female, thinking about how to transgress the conventions that shape our understanding of the body. The final piece that I want to share with you is a work that many of you will likely have seen. It's a piece by Rhys Ernst, who also appears elsewhere in the exhibition. This consists of 4 single-channel videos, and these are actually the title sequence for the TV show Transparent that Rhys was a producer and director of. And in thinking about these, I had learned that Rhys had originally intended these to be artworks, but eventually they made it into the opening sequence, and each season has, even though they're the same duration, they have slightly different imagery. And so for the purpose of the exhibition, I invited Rhys to show these as artworks, and the titles and the actors' names were stripped out, and the titles are shown on loop, on repeat. And they include various footage that Rhys Ernst has appropriated from home movies, 20th century LA, clips from the 1968 film The Queen, and as they describe, other gems, other forgotten gems from queer and trans history. And just like in the work of Sandra Perry or Sitzel Meinische Hansen or Nancy Burson and Gretchen Bender, what I really value about this particular work is the way in which Rhys is asking how media, how TV shapes and forms our understanding of queer identity and of transgender life. So this particular piece forms the ending of the show in Miami, and it's always been a pleasure to see people in the gallery experience the work, because the soundtrack is very familiar. So you see people immediately recognizing the sound and then understanding where that recognition comes from. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you have a chance to engage with the show either in person until May 30th or online. There's a number of various pieces of content on the Walker or the Yerba Buena Center website, as well as MOAD's site. MOAD will soon be publishing one of their issues of Unbound that will include great dialogues between Tishan Su and Jess Fan, as well as Trisha Baga, Lynn Hirschman-Leeson, as well as 2 new essays made especially for the issues. So thank you for watching, and hope you can see the show.